Have you ever felt like dating these days is just one exhausting chase? Always trying to impress, always waiting for that text back, always wondering if you said the right thing. It's enough to make anyone feel drained. But what if there was another way, a way to step off that emotional roller coaster and find something deeper, something unshakable? That's exactly what Stoicism offers. This ancient philosophy, practiced by some of history's most disciplined minds, teaches a radically different approach to relationships, one where confidence isn't built on external validation, but on an unbreakable sense of self-worth. And here's the thing, Stoic men don't chase, not because they don't care, but because they understand something most people miss. That real strength comes from letting go of the need to control every outcome. Think about the last time you felt anxious over someone's response or scrambled to keep their attention. It's exhausting, right? Now picture this. A man who doesn't cling, doesn't overanalyze, doesn't bend himself into knots just to be liked. That's the Stoic approach. It's not about playing games or acting cold. It's about embodying a quiet certainty that draws people in naturally. While everyone else is running after validation, the Stoic stands firm, knowing his value isn't dictated by someone else's interest. And paradoxically, that's what makes him magnetic. This isn't just theory, it's a shift that changes everything. When you stop chasing, you start seeing relationships for what they truly are, opportunities for mutual growth, not transactions of attention. Stoic men focus on what they can control, their actions, their integrity, their resilience, and let go of what they can't. No desperate texts, no overthinking, no energy wasted on people who don't reciprocate. Imagine the freedom of that. Over the next 20 reasons, we'll break down exactly why this mindset works, how it transforms your relationships, and why the most powerful thing you can do is often nothing at all. If you're ready to step into a calmer, more confident version of yourself, keep watching. This is where the chase ends and where something far better begins. A Stoic man doesn't chase because he doesn't need to. His worth isn't something he borrows from others, it's built from within. Imagine standing so firmly in your own self-respect that you no longer scramble for approval or reassurance. That's the essence of self-sufficiency in Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome at its height, wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. He wasn't just talking about enduring hardships, he was teaching a way of living where external validation loses its grip on you. This isn't about shutting people out or pretending not to care. It's about recognizing that your confidence can't be outsourced. Most of us fall into the trap of chasing attention, thinking, if they like me, then I'll feel valuable. But Stoicism flips that script. A man grounded in self-sufficiency doesn't seek confirmation because he's already at peace with who he is. He engages with others from a place of fullness, not lack. Picture two men at a party. One laughs too loud at jokes he doesn't find funny, adjusts his opinions to fit the crowd, and anxiously checks his phone for replies. The other speaks when he has something to say, listens with genuine interest, and leaves when he's ready, no lingering for approval. Which one carries himself like he owns the room? The difference isn't arrogance, it's sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius didn't chase the favor of his senators or the adoration of the masses. He ruled with quiet authority because his sense of purpose came from his principles, not their applause. That's the Stoic secret. When you stop needing others to complete you, you become someone they can't ignore. It's not detachment, it's freedom. You're no longer a beggar for affection, you're a host offering connection on your own terms. And paradoxically, that's what makes people lean in closer. They sense the absence of desperation, the presence of something unshakable. This is why Stoic men don't chase. They cultivate an inner citadel, a fortress of self-trust no outside opinion can storm. If a conversation fades or a connection doesn't deepen, they don't take it as a reflection of their worth. They redirect that energy inward, refining their character, their work, their peace. Because in the end, chasing is just fear in disguise, the fear that you're not enough without someone else's stamp of approval. But a Stoic knows the truth. You were enough long before anyone else noticed. The Stoic man knows something most people never grasp. Not everything is worth his energy. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's most influential philosophers, put it bluntly: some things are within our power while others are not. This is the dichotomy of control, the radical idea that divides life into two categories: what you can change and what you must accept. Most of our suffering comes from confusing the two. Think about dating. You can control how honestly you communicate, how much effort you put into being present, how you treat someone. But you can't control whether they text back, whether they feel the same, or whether they choose to stay. The moment you tie your peace to those outcomes, you hand over your power. Here's where the Stoic man stands apart. He pours his energy into the first category, his own actions, and releases the rest. No refreshing his inbox 20 times an hour, no rehearsing conversations that might never happen, no twisting himself into someone he's not just to hold attention. Because he understands a fundamental truth: chasing what you can't control is like shouting at the tide to stop rising, futile, exhausting, undignified. Ever seen someone panic when a text goes unanswered? That's the sound of a man who hasn't learned the dichotomy. The Stoic, meanwhile, sends the message and then moves on with his day. Not out of indifference, but out of respect for his own time and sanity. This isn't passivity, it's precision. Imagine two archers. One obsesses over the wind, the crowd's reaction, whether the target will applaud his shot. The other focuses solely on his stance, his grip, his release. Who's more likely to hit the mark? The Stoic is the second archer. He knows his job isn't to guarantee the outcome, it's to perfect the effort. Relationships work the same way. You can't force someone to value you, but you can decide not to undervalue yourself. That shift changes everything. Suddenly, you're no longer hostage to someone else's whims. You're anchored in your own agency. Epictetus had a student once who feared failing a speech contest. "What if the judges dismiss me?" he asked. The reply was classic Stoicism: why worry about what isn't yours to decide? The judge's opinions belonged to them. The student's preparation, his courage to speak, his integrity, those were his. The Stoic man applies this same clarity to dating. He doesn't chase validation because he knows it was never his to claim in the first place. His worth isn't sitting on someone else's shelf waiting to be handed to him. It's in his hands, already etched into how he lives, how he thinks, how he refuses to beg for scraps of attention. And here's the paradox: letting go of control often gives you more influence. People sense when you're not clinging to them for validation. They notice when you're solid, unshaken by their moods or silence. That kind of presence is magnetic. The Stoic doesn't manipulate outcomes. He elevates them simply by being rooted in what's his to govern. So when he walks away from a one-sided conversation or declines to play emotional chess, it's not a tactic, it's a statement. A reminder that his peace isn't negotiable. That's the power of the dichotomy. It turns chasing into a choice, one he's too wise to make. A Stoic man doesn't build his happiness on the shaky foundation of someone else's attention because he knows how easily it can crumble. Seneca, the great Stoic thinker, wrote to his friend Lucilius about this very trap. "You ask me to say what you should consider it particularly important to avoid. My answer is this: a mass crowd." He wasn't just warning against physical crowds, but the psychological ones, the voices in your head whispering, "Do they like me? Did I say too much? Why haven't they replied?" Emotional dependency, in Stoic terms, is handing those strangers the keys to your peace. Picture someone who only feels worthwhile when they're liked, validated, or pursued. Their mood swings with every text notification, every glance, every hint of rejection. Now contrast that with the Stoic approach. Happiness isn't something you extract from others, it's something you cultivate within, independent of their choices. Seneca compared this to building a house on solid rock instead of sand. When the waves of other people's opinions roll in, one foundation holds firm, the other washes away. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending not to care. It's about recognizing that no one else should be the architect of your self-worth. Think of emotional dependency like holding a cup under someone else's faucet, hoping they'll fill it. The Stoic man carries his own well. He enjoys connection, but he doesn't starve without it. Seneca put it sharply. If you live in dependence on another's table, you'll always be waiting for dinner. Translation: if you outsource your joy, you'll always be hungry. Take modern dating. How many people twist themselves into knots trying to be what they think others want? Changing opinions, hiding quirks, amping up enthusiasm when they're tired, all for crumbs of approval. The Stoic doesn't chase that dynamic because he refuses to make his happiness a hostage negotiation. Seneca's letters are full of this theme. True freedom comes from needing nothing from others that they could choose to withhold. Does that mean Stoic men are cold or detached? Far from it, they experience affection deeply, but without the desperation that turns it into a lifeline. Imagine two men in a budding romance. One texts constantly to reassure himself she's still interested, analyzing every delay as a sign he's losing her. The other stays present, enjoys the moments they share, and trusts the connection without clinging to it. Which one radiates the kind of calm that draws people in? Seneca's wisdom here is counterintuitive. The less you need someone, the more authentically you can love them. Dependency masquerades as passion, but it's really fear in disguise, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. The Stoic dismantles that fear by filling his own cup first. He doesn't avoid intimacy, he avoids the lie that someone else's attention is the missing piece of himself. So when a Stoic man doesn't chase, it's not because he's indifferent. It's because he's resolved a deeper question. Am I enough, even if I'm alone? Until the answer is yes, no amount of chasing will ever feel like enough either. Seneca said it best, no man is free who is not master of himself. Emotional independence isn't isolation, it's the unshakable ground from which real connection grows. A Stoic man doesn't waste energy clinging to outcomes because he's mastered the art of non-attachment. But don't mistake this for apathy. Non-attachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring deeply while releasing the need to control how things unfold. This is where Stoicism's profound concept of amor fati, the love of fate, comes alive. Imagine walking through life with open hands, not white-knuckling every interaction, not treating relationships like puzzles you must solve to feel secure. The Stoic man understands that forcing a connection is like squeezing water. The tighter you grip, the more slips through your fingers. Consider how most people approach dating. They fixate on a specific result, a text back, a second date, a commitment, as if their peace depends on it. Now contrast that with amor fati, the practice of embracing whatever happens as if you'd chosen it yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, rejection isn't a setback, it's redirection. A conversation that fizzles isn't a failure, it's clarity. The Stoic man doesn't resist these moments, he leans into them, trusting that life unfolds as it should. This isn't resignation, it's liberation. Picture two men pursuing the same woman. One agonizes over every unanswered message, rearranges his schedule to be available at her whim, and molds himself into what he thinks she wants. The other engages authentically, enjoys the moments they share, and if she withdraws, meets that reality with the same calm as sunshine or rain. Which one carries an air of quiet confidence? The difference isn't effort, it's attachment. The first man is invested in an outcome, the second is invested in his integrity. Epictetus, who endured slavery before teaching philosophy, framed it bluntly. Demand not that events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will go on well. That's the heart of non-attachment. It's not about suppressing desire but refining it, wanting what is rather than suffering over what isn't. Think of it like sailing. You can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. A Stoic man doesn't rage against the currents, he learns to navigate them. If a connection drifts, he doesn't chase, he observes, adapts, and maintains his course. Here's the paradox: non-attachment often deepens connections precisely because it removes desperation. People sense when you're not clinging to them for validation. They notice when you're fully present but also fully capable of walking away. That's magnetic. Ever met someone who's entirely at ease whether you stay or go? There's a quiet power in that, an unspoken respect for their own boundaries and yours. Amor Fati takes this further. It's not just accepting fate, it's loving it. Imagine a man who meets rejection with curiosity instead of collapse. Instead of thinking, "Why don't they want me?" he wonders, "What does this free me for?" That shift transforms every ending into a beginning. The Stoic doesn't see closed doors as insults. He sees them as signs that his energy belongs elsewhere. This is why Stoic men don't chase. They engage, they appreciate, they invest, but they don't confuse attachment with love. Real connection thrives in freedom, not force. And when you stop demanding that life or love bend to your will, something unexpected happens. You start recognizing the gifts in what actually unfolds. The wrong person steps aside to reveal the right one. The missed call saves you from a hollow relationship. The silence teaches you what noise never could. That's Amor Fati in action, not just enduring fate, but embracing it as the wisest path forward. A Stoic man doesn't chase because he understands something fundamental about human dignity. Respect isn't just about how you treat others, it's about how you honor their freedom to choose. Modern dating often turns into a game of persistence, where no is treated as a challenge rather than a boundary. But Stoicism flips that script. Think about it. What does it say about your respect for someone if you interpret their disinterest as a puzzle to solve? The Stoic approach isn't just about self-control. It's about recognizing that another person's autonomy is sacred. Picture this common scenario. A woman politely declines a date, only to be met with relentless follow-ups. "Give me one more chance. You just don't know me well enough yet." Now contrast that with the Stoic perspective. Epictetus, who knew the sting of being treated as property during his enslavement, wrote, "What belongs to others is not yours to claim." He wasn't just talking about material things. A person's attention, their affection, their time, these are gifts, not entitlements. Chasing someone who's withdrawn their interest isn't romantic. It's a violation of their right to choose. This isn't about passivity, it's about integrity. A Stoic man expresses interest clearly, but the moment it's not reciprocated, he steps back, not out of wounded pride, but out of reverence for the other person's agency. Modern dating culture often glorifies the grand gesture, the relentless pursuit, as if love is something you can win through sheer persistence. But Stoicism asks a harder question. If you have to convince someone to want you, what does that say about the connection? Real respect means trusting that a no is complete on its own, not an invitation to negotiate. Consider how boundaries work in practice. When someone sets one, whether it's a delayed response, a gentle letdown, or outright rejection, the Stoic doesn't see it as a personal affront. He sees it as information. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." That's the essence of boundary respect. Most people chase because they're trying to control how others perceive them. The Stoic surrenders that illusion. He knows that true connection can't be forced, only offered and received freely. There's a quiet power in this approach. Imagine two men. One texts repeatedly after being left on read, crafting longer and more desperate appeals. The other sends a single message, then redirects his energy not as a tactic but as a principle. Which one communicates more self-respect, more respect for her? The Stoic man doesn't blur lines because he understands that clarity is kindness. No mixed signals, no guilt trips, no emotional arm twisting. Just a simple, unshakable truth. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And here's the irony. This very restraint often becomes the most attractive quality. People sense when you're not trying to steamroll their boundaries. They notice when you're secure enough to walk away rather than manipulate their choices. That's the Stoic secret. Respect isn't just something you give others. It's something you demonstrate about yourself. By refusing to chase, you show that your dignity doesn't depend on winning someone over. You affirm that both of you deserve relationships built on mutual desire, not obligation or pressure. Epictetus put it starkly: freedom isn't secured by filling men's desires, but by removing them. In other words, chasing is just another form of craving, one that corrodes your peace and disrespects theirs. The Stoic man doesn't try to fill the silence with his demands. He lets it speak, because sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is nothing at all. A Stoic man doesn't chase fleeting pleasures because he's built for something far more enduring: purpose. While modern culture often equates happiness with constant stimulation, endless swipes, cheap validation, dopamine hits from another match, Stoicism measures fulfillment differently. It's not about how much pleasure you can accumulate, but how meaningfully you can contribute. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who shaped Epictetus, put it bluntly: we are born not for pleasure alone, but for action and duty. That distinction changes everything. Most people chase relationships like they're collecting trophies, seeking the rush of a new connection without considering whether it aligns with who they aspire to be. The Stoic asks a deeper question: does this draw me closer to my best self or distract me from it? Consider two men at a bar. One is scanning the room for the easiest conquest, fueled by the thrill of the hunt. The other engages only when genuine connection sparks, not because he's withholding, but because he's selective with his energy. The difference isn't morality, it's orientation. Hedonism chases the high of the moment. Stoicism cultivates the legacy of a lifetime. This isn't about judging pleasure, but recognizing its place. A fine meal, a night of laughter, physical intimacy, these are gifts. But when they become the goal, something vital is lost: the compass of purpose. Musonius Rufus challenged his students to examine their motives. What good is pleasure if it weakens your character? Think about how often people tolerate disrespect, abandon boundaries, or mute their values just to keep someone's attention. That's pleasure steering the ship, and it always crashes eventually. The Stoic anchors himself in virtue instead: integrity over infatuation, growth over gratification. It's not that he doesn't feel desire, he simply refuses to let it dictate his dignity. History offers a striking example. When Emperor Nero ordered Musonius to compromise his teachings for court favor, the philosopher chose exile. Pleasure would have said yes: power, luxury, survival. Purpose said no. That same clarity applies to relationships today. How many people stay in shallow connections because they're comfortable, or chase validation from those who don't value them? The Stoic steps back because he knows a life devoted to pleasure is like drinking salt water. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. This doesn't mean Stoics live like ascetics. They enjoy beauty, companionship, laughter, but as byproducts of living well, not as obsessions. Imagine building a career. One man takes any job that offers a quick paycheck, hopping between roles with no larger aim. Another chooses work that aligns with his skills and values, even if it pays less upfront, who builds lasting satisfaction. The Stoic approaches relationships the same way. He's not against joy, he's against letting it eclipse his North Star. Musonius Rufus taught that duty isn't a burden, it's the framework for freedom. When you know why you're here, you stop wandering into dead ends. A man grounded in purpose doesn't chase half-hearted connections because his time is reserved for what truly resonates. He doesn't fear missing out, he's too focused on building in. And that selectivity radiates. People sense when you're not desperate for their approval, when your presence isn't a transaction but a choice. Here's the paradox the Stoic understands: pleasure pursued for its own sake often slips away. But purpose, that stays. It becomes the filter through which every opportunity, including love, is either embraced or released. So when a Stoic man walks away from what's merely tempting, it's not deprivation. It's devotion to the life he's committed to crafting, one virtuous step at a time. A Stoic man acts with excellence not for the reward, but because excellence is its own reward. This is the core of detachment from outcomes, doing what's right without clinging to how it's received. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a reminder in his journal that cuts to the heart of this: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, notice what he didn't say. Be good so others will praise you. The distinction is everything. When a Stoic expresses interest, offers kindness, or shows up fully, he does so without an invisible contract expecting a specific response. His integrity isn't a bargaining chip, it's a way of life. Think about rejection. Most people treat it like a verdict on their worth, scrambling to adjust, apologize, or prove themselves. But the Stoic reframes it entirely. In Meditations, Marcus writes, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it away. There are brambles in the path, then go around." You don't need to demand, "Why were these things put in my way?" That's the essence of detachment. A bitter cucumber isn't a personal insult, it's just reality. Similarly, when someone isn't interested, the Stoic doesn't dissect it for hidden meanings. He accepts it as plainly as he would a locked door. No drama, no desperation, just a quiet pivot toward what's still open. This isn't indifference, it's wisdom. Picture two men after a first date. One agonizes over every word he said, replaying moments to diagnose where he failed. The other reflects simply: did I show up as my best self? If the answer is yes, his work is done regardless of the outcome. Marcus Aurelius modeled this during his reign. Faced with betrayal, slander, even plots against his life, he responded not with rage or self-doubt, but with a question: did I act justly? If so, the rest was noise. That's the power of detaching from results. It turns rejection from a wound into whether something that passes over you without changing your core. There's a liberating clarity in this approach. Most dating advice revolves around gaming outcomes. Text back in 3 hours to seem busy. Play hard to get. The Stoic rejects that theater. He knows manipulation might win short-term attention, but only authenticity builds connections worth keeping. When Marcus wrote, "Let opinion be silenced, let the gods see what's truly in your heart," he was pointing to this truth: chasing approval corrupts your integrity. Detachment preserves it. Here's the paradox: when you stop needing a specific outcome, you become more magnetic. People sense when your actions come from a place of wholeness rather than lack. Imagine a musician who plays for the love of music, not applause. There's a purity to his performance that resonates deeper than any crowd-pleasing gimmick. The Stoic man brings that same energy to relationships. He engages not to extract validation, but to express his genuine self, and if that isn't reciprocated, he walks away with the same quiet dignity he brought in. No tantrums, no bargaining, no silent resentment, just an unshakable knowing that his value wasn't in their hands to begin with. Marcus Aurelius put it best: the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because you must stand ready and firm against the unexpected. Detachment is that readiness. It's not passive resignation, it's active resilience. The Stoic doesn't chase because he's too busy building a life where one person's no can't derail his peace. And in that space, something remarkable happens. He becomes the kind of man for whom the right yes feels effortless, not earned. Patience isn't just waiting, it's the quiet strength of knowing that rushing rarely leads to anything real. For the Stoic man, this isn't passive delay, it's active preparation. The ancient practice of premeditatio malorum, literally, the premeditation of evils, wasn't about pessimism. It was about rehearsing life's uncertainties so they couldn't shake him when they arrived. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, not with fear, but with the calm of someone who's already mapped the terrain. That's how Stoics approach relationships, eyes open, pace steady, unrattled by the bumps along the way. Consider modern dating's frantic energy, the rush to define things, the anxiety over labels, the impatience for commitment. Now contrast that with a man who's done the inner work of premeditatio malorum. He's already asked himself the hard questions. What if she loses interest? What if this fades? What if I'm misunderstood? By facing these possibilities head-on, he strips them of their power to derail him. Seneca compared this to a sailor studying storms before setting sail. The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. That's the Stoic secret. Patience grows from preparedness, not naivety. This mindset transforms how he engages. While others panic over delayed texts or mixed signals, he stays grounded. He's not indifferent, he's simply conditioned himself to respond rather than react. Picture two men in the early stages of dating. One bombards her with messages when she's busy, interpreting her silence as rejection. The other gives space, trusting that genuine connection isn't measured by hourly check-ins. The difference isn't attachment, it's perspective. The Stoic knows that patience isn't about suppressing desire, it's about elevating it above the need for instant gratification. The practice goes deeper. Premeditatio malorum isn't just expecting obstacles, it's refining your ability to navigate them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Notice he didn't say this to breed cynicism, but to disarm disappointment. Apply this to dating. If you've already considered that sparks might fade or communication could falter, you're not shattered when it happens. You're ready not with resignation, but with resilience. This cultivated patience also reveals what's truly worth pursuing. Ever watched someone force a connection out of loneliness or impatience? It's like planting a seed and digging it up daily to check for roots. The Stoic man waters what's alive and lets time do the rest. Epictetus offered a brutal but freeing truth. No great thing is created suddenly. Not friendships, not mastery, not love. The man who understands this doesn't chase urgency, he invests in substance. He knows that rushing often leads to choosing the wrong person for the right reasons, or the right person at the wrong time. Here's the unexpected payoff. Patience becomes a filter. People reveal themselves when you're not filling every silence with pressure. Flings burn out, real connections simmer. The Stoic doesn't mistake intensity for intimacy because he's disciplined enough to distinguish between the two. Think of it like a craftsman shaping wood. Force it too fast and it splits. Work with its grain and it becomes something enduring. That's the heart of Stoic patience. It's not about sitting back and hoping. It's about moving forward with the unshakable knowing that some things, the right things, can't be hurried. And in a world obsessed with speed, that very restraint becomes revolutionary. Neediness is the antithesis of Stoic strength. It's the shadow that vanishes when you stand in your own light. The Stoic man doesn't chase affection or status because he's resolved a fundamental truth. These things were never meant to be grasped like lifelines. The ancient Stoics classified externals, wealth, reputation, even other people's approval as indifference, not worthless but not essential to a life well lived. Epictetus put it bluntly, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. That's the litmus test. When you stop seeing admiration as oxygen, you stop gasping for it in every interaction. Picture neediness in action, the man who molds his personality to fit each new crowd, who panics when left on read, who interprets silence as a verdict on his worth. Now contrast that with the Stoic stance. Imagine a tree bending in the wind. It doesn't beg the storm to stop, it roots deeper. That's the shift. Neediness mistakes attention for nourishment, but the Stoic knows real sustenance comes from within. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private notes, "You don't need to have an opinion about this. You don't need to react. You don't need to chase." 3 quiet rejections of the hunger that drives most people's actions. This isn't about suppressing desire, it's about refining what you consider valuable. Think of it like currency. Most people trade their peace for counterfeit coins, likes, flirtatious glances, the fleeting high of being chosen. The Stoic recognizes these as unstable currency. He invests instead in virtues no one can take: self-discipline, courage, wisdom. Seneca warned his friend Lucilius about this exact trap. You ask how to tell if a thing is good or not. See if it makes you needy. If it does, it's not good. That's the core insight. Real strength isn't proven by how much you can acquire, but by how little you require to feel whole. Consider 2 men at a social event. One laughs too loudly at jokes he doesn't find funny, his eyes darting to see who's watching. The other engages authentically, unbothered whether his humor lands or his stories impress. The difference isn't confidence, it's sovereignty. The Stoic doesn't perform for applause because he's already paid in a sturdier currency. Even attraction changes under this lens. He admires beauty without demanding it admire him back. He enjoys connection without treating it as validation. History offers a striking example. When the Roman general Cato the Younger, a paragon of Stoic virtue, was ridiculed in public for his outdated clothing, he didn't bristle or explain. He simply kept walking. His biographer noted, "He wore his poverty like a king wears purple." That's the essence of rejecting neediness. When you stop outsourcing your worth, you become immune to the opinions that once ruled you. Modern dating could learn from this. How many texts are sent not from genuine interest but from the terror of being forgotten? How many relationships persist not from love but from the fear of being alone? The Stoic antidote is simple but radical: want without needing. You can desire companionship, appreciate attraction, enjoy intimacy, all without treating them as necessities. Epictetus framed it as the difference between a tourist and a homeowner. If you kiss your child, your brother, your friend, remind yourself that you love a mortal thing, something not your own. You aren't kissing flesh but borrowing it, harsh perhaps but liberating. When you stop clinging to people as possessions, you love them more cleanly without the desperation that poisons connection. This is why Stoic men don't chase, not because they're indifferent, but because they've upgraded their economy. They trade in the kind of fulfillment that can't be withheld, the kind built on virtues that no text left unread, no date cancelled, no rejection letter can ever diminish. And in that space, an alchemy happens. The less you need from others, the more freely you can offer yourself. The Stoic man doesn't chase because he recognizes the fundamental irrationality of it, like trying to force a river to flow uphill. Nature has its rhythms, and chemistry isn't something you manufacture through sheer willpower. Think about it logically. If a connection requires relentless pursuit just to stay alive, what does that say about its foundation? Epictetus, who survived slavery by mastering his own mind, put it plainly: don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well. In other words, chasing what isn't meant to be is like arguing with gravity, exhausting and utterly pointless. Consider how most people approach attraction. They meet someone who's lukewarm, and instead of accepting the signal, they double down, texting more, planning grand gestures, twisting themselves into versions they think will be more appealing. But Stoicism asks a simple question: why? If you have to convince someone to want you, you're not building a connection, you're negotiating a hostage situation. The Stoic sees this clearly. He doesn't mistake persistence for virtue because he knows energy spent chasing could be invested in becoming someone who doesn't need to. Take Seneca's metaphor of the archer. A skilled archer focuses on drawing the bow correctly, aiming true, releasing smoothly. But once the arrow flies, the outcome is no longer his to control. The Stoic applies this to relationships. He brings his best honesty, presence, sincerity, but whether the other person reciprocates, that's the arrow in flight. Obsessing over where it lands doesn't change the trajectory. It just wastes time better spent knocking the next arrow. Modern dating culture glorifies the chase as romantic, but Stoicism exposes it as illogical. You can't persuade someone into genuine desire. You can only reveal enough of yourself to let them decide. Here's where the irrationality becomes glaring. Most chasers operate on a hidden assumption. If I try hard enough, they'll change their mind. But Stoics study human nature too deeply to fall for that. Marcus Aurelius observed, when a person's basic character shifts, it's either because their deepest values have changed, which is rare, or they're revealing who they were all along. In other words, chasing ignores reality twice. First, by denying the other person's current lack of interest, and second, by pretending your efforts can override their autonomy. The Stoic doesn't indulge that fantasy. He respects the evidence in front of him. There's a practical cost to this irrationality, too. Every minute spent analyzing mixed signals or rehearsing apologies is a minute stolen from self-improvement. Musonius Rufus taught that time is the one resource we can't replenish, so why pour it into dead ends? Imagine two men. One spends weeks agonizing over a woman who ghosted him, dissecting every past interaction. The other accepts the silence, turns his attention to his work, his health, his friendships. A year later, who's more likely to attract someone aligned with his values? Chasing isn't just futile, it's a diversion from the real work of becoming someone who doesn't need to. This isn't about giving up too easily. It's about recognizing the difference between nurturing something mutual and trying to resurrect something that was never alive. The Stoic asks himself, am I acting from abundance or scarcity, from strength or fear? If the answer tilts toward fear, fear of being alone, fear of rejection, then the chase isn't romantic, it's emotional gambling. And the house always wins. That's the ultimate irrationality, treating love like a slot machine where persistence pays out. But real connection isn't luck, it's alignment. The Stoic man doesn't chase because he'd rather invest in becoming the kind of man who attracts effortlessly, not through games but through gravity. And when you stop forcing what isn't meant to be, you create space for what is. The Stoic man doesn't chase because he's discovered something most people fear, the profound richness of solitude. Seneca, who wrote letters on serenity from exile, put it beautifully. No one can be happy if they regard themselves as a pitiful fragment dependent on others for wholeness. That's the heart of it. Chasing often stems from a quiet terror of being alone, as if solitude were a void to escape rather than a space to reclaim. But the Stoic doesn't run from silence, he cultivates it. While others scramble to fill every moment with chatter, notifications, and half-hearted connections, he understands that solitude isn't emptiness, it's the workshop where character is forged. Picture two men after a breakup. One immediately downloads dating apps, texts old flames, stays out until dawn, anything to avoid the quiet of his own apartment. The other sits with the discomfort, journals, reflects, rebuilds. Which one emerges stronger? Seneca observed this dynamic in ancient Rome. Men travel to escape themselves, climbing mountains, sailing oceans only to carry their chaos with them. The Stoic stops running. He turns inward not as punishment but as practice, because when you're at peace in your own company, no relationship becomes a lifeline. This isn't about rejecting connection, it's about refining its quality. Think of solitude like seasoning, it deepens flavor. A man who's comfortable alone doesn't cling to relationships out of desperation, he chooses them from fullness. Seneca's letters to Lucilius overflow with this theme. Retreat into yourself as often as possible. It's there you'll meet the person no change of fortune can destroy. Modern dating culture treats solitude like a disease to cure, hence the frantic swiping, the ghosting, the breadcrumbing. The Stoic sees it as medicine. Consider how most people treat quiet moments, alone at dinner, scroll through photos of happier couples, a free evening, obsess over unanswered texts. The Stoic redirects that energy. He reads, he walks, he thinks. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, began each day in solitude, not to plan conquests but to ground himself in what mattered. That discipline transforms loneliness into sacred space. You stop seeing solitude as something to survive and start recognizing it as the birthplace of resilience. Here's the paradox no one mentions. The more you cherish solitude, the more magnetic you become in company. People sense when you're not using them to fill a void. They notice when your presence is a gift, not a demand. Seneca described it as the difference between a beggar and a king. He who needs nothing from the crowd walks among them with rare grace. That's the Stoic secret. When you stop chasing, you stop broadcasting neediness, and that's precisely what draws others in. So when a Stoic man doesn't chase, it's not because he's aloof. It's because he's already found the one companion no one can take away, himself. And in that unshakable friendship, he discovers a truth that changes everything. Real connection isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about meeting someone who complements the wholeness you've already built. A Stoic man doesn't waste breath on empty promises or performative affection. He lets his life do the talking. In a world obsessed with over-the-top gestures and viral declarations of love, the Stoic stands apart by understanding one simple truth: consistency is the loudest language of character. Marcus Aurelius never rallied his troops with fiery speeches. He led by waking before dawn, sharing their rations, and marching through the same mud. That's the Stoic way: attraction through action, not announcement. Think about modern dating. How many people proclaim devotion in grand statements, only to vanish when real effort is required? The Stoic sees through this theater. He knows that love isn't measured in bouquets or public posts, but in the quiet, daily choice to show up. Epictetus, who endured slavery before teaching emperors, put it bluntly: "Don't tell me your principles. Show me what you've built, and I'll tell you what you believe." That's the litmus test. A man who spends his energy proving himself through words is often compensating for a lack of substance. The Stoic doesn't chase with speeches. He earns trust through unwavering conduct. Consider two men pursuing the same woman. One showers her with poetic texts and elaborate dates, but cancels last minute when something better comes up. The other arrives on time, listens without distraction, follows through on the smallest commitments. No fanfare, no flattery, just reliability. Which one leaves a lasting impression? The Stoic doesn't confuse volume with value. He understands that a single action weighed with integrity echoes louder than 1,000 sweet nothings. This philosophy extends beyond romance. The ancient Stoics judged leaders not by their edicts but by their example. When Seneca advised Nero, he didn't just preach temperance, he lived in a modest home despite his wealth. When Cato the Younger opposed corruption, he didn't just give speeches, he wore plain robes and slept on the ground to prove his indifference to luxury. These men knew credibility isn't claimed, it's demonstrated. Apply that to relationships. A partner who promises loyalty but flirts behind your back is a walking contradiction. The Stoic aligns his behavior with his values so completely that no reassurance is needed. There's a quiet magnetism to this approach. People instinctively trust those whose actions match their words, not perfectly but persistently. Imagine a coworker who volunteers for tough projects without complaint, a friend who remembers your allergies without being reminded, a lover whose steady presence makes "I'll be there" feel like a law of nature. These aren't grand gestures, they're the bricks of respect. The Stoic builds his relationships this way, one unshakable deed at a time. And here's the secret: when you stop announcing your virtues and start embodying them, you attract people who value depth over drama. No need to chase when your life speaks for you. A man rooted in action doesn't beg for attention, he becomes the kind of person others move toward without persuasion. Because in the end, the most compelling thing you can offer isn't what you say you'll do. It's what you've already done day after day without expecting applause. That's how Stoics turn the chase into gravity. A Stoic man doesn't chase because he recognizes the corrosive cost of toxic dynamics relationships built not on mutual respect, but on the shaky foundation of control and desperation. The ancient Stoics warned relentlessly against letting passion override principle, and nowhere does this apply more starkly than in the feverish pursuit of someone who's already shown disinterest. Seneca, who counseled Nero during the emperor's most tyrannical spirals, saw firsthand how unchecked desire distorts power. Every passion is a form of servitude. That's the paradox of chasing. The more you grasp for someone's attention, the more you enslave yourself to their whims. Think about the unbalanced relationships you've witnessed or maybe even lived. The partner who breadcrumbs affection to keep the other guessing. The one who withholds approval to maintain leverage. The dynamic where one person is perpetually proving themselves while the other holds veto power over their worth. These aren't connections, they're power struggles disguised as romance. The Stoic avoids them not out of pride but out of self-preservation. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood this viscerally. No man is free who is enslaved to his own cravings. Chase someone who plays hot and cold, and you've already handed them the leash. This isn't hypothetical. History's Stoics lived these warnings. When Marcus Aurelius discovered his wife's infidelity, he didn't rage, grovel, or retaliate. He examined his own expectations. His journal reveals the insight. When you're upset by external events, it's not the events themselves disturbing you, but your judgments about them. Apply that to chasing. The pain isn't in their rejection, it's in your belief that their acceptance defines you. Toxic dynamics thrive on that exact delusion, keeping you hooked on the illusion that if you just try harder, you'll finally earn what should have been freely given. Modern dating is rife with these traps. The "why won't they commit" limbo, the "I can fix them" fantasy, the "if I suffer enough they'll see my worth" martyrdom. Stoicism cuts through this noise with surgical clarity. Any relationship requiring you to abandon your peace to maintain it isn't worth keeping. Musonius Rufus taught that passion, pathos in Greek, literally means something suffered. Chasing is suffering masquerading as love. It's the difference between building a bridge and laying yourself down as the planks. There's a quiet dignity in walking away from these games. Picture two co-workers. One exhausts himself trying to impress a boss who'll never be satisfied. The other does excellent work, then clocks out without begging for praise. Who commands more respect? The Stoic applies this same discernment to romance. He doesn't confuse obsession with devotion because he knows the darkest prisons don't have bars. They have terms like soulmate and meant to be, whispered by people who have mistaken possession for connection. The antidote: cultivate relationships where both parties stand as equals, neither chasing nor fleeing. Seneca wrote, "Friendship always benefits, love sometimes injures." He wasn't cynical, just precise. Love that drains you isn't love, it's colonization. The Stoic doesn't colonize or let himself be colonized. He engages with open hands, not clutching fingers. Because in the end, the healthiest dynamic isn't the one you fight to keep. It's the one that flourishes effortlessly, like a tree rooted deep enough to weather any storm. There's a quiet confidence in knowing that what's meant for you won't pass you by. And that's the Stoic's bedrock when it comes to relationships. While others exhaust themselves trying to manufacture connections or salvage fading sparks, the Stoic man operates from a different premise: trust in the unfolding of life itself. Marcus Aurelius called this amor fati, the love of fate, but it's not passive surrender. It's the recognition that forcing what isn't aligned only distorts it. Think of a river. You can dam it, divert it, fight its current, but eventually water finds its own path. The Stoic doesn't see rejection as a failure. He sees it as the universe rerouting him toward what's truly his. This trust isn't blind optimism. It's rooted in the Stoic concept of logos, the intelligent order woven into existence. The ancients believed nothing happens to you, it happens for you, even when the reason isn't immediately clear. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's most revered teacher, framed it like this: does what's happened prevent you from being just generous, self-controlled? Then remember, no one can stop you from acting with virtue. Apply that to dating. If a connection fades, the Stoic doesn't rage against the loss. He asks, what does this free me to become? Because trust isn't about getting what you want. It's about realizing that what you need is already at work, even in the disappointment. Consider how most people react to romantic uncertainty. They double down, texting more, analyzing every interaction, replaying moments to diagnose where they went wrong. The Stoic pivots inward. He tends to his own growth, knowing that the right people are drawn to the energy he cultivates, not the effort he exhausts. Picture two gardeners. One digs up his seeds daily to check for roots, shouting at the soil to hurry. The other waters weeds and waits, trusting the process. Which one's harvest thrives? Chasing assumes lack, trust assumes divine timing. History offers a striking example. When the Stoic philosopher Zeno lost his entire fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't despair. He wandered into a bookstore, discovered Socrates' teachings, and founded a philosophy that would outlast empires. Later, he'd say, "That shipwreck was the best thing that ever happened to me." The Stoic man brings that same perspective to relationships. The rejection that stings today might be the pivot that leads you to someone who aligns with your deepest values. The silence that feels like abandonment, it might be the space required for clarity to emerge. This isn't about sitting idle. The Stoic takes action, but he distinguishes between effort and force. Effort is showing up authentically, communicating clearly, investing where energy is reciprocated. Force is manipulating outcomes, clinging to what's slipping away, betraying your boundaries to keep someone near. Seneca put it sharply, fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. The man who trusts the process doesn't beg fate to change course, he adjusts his sails to meet it. And here's the paradox, this very trust often becomes the magnet. People sense when you're not desperate for their presence, when your peace isn't contingent on their choices. There's a gravity to someone who moves through life with the quiet assurance that what's theirs will find them. The Stoic doesn't confuse surrender with defeat. He knows that releasing what wasn't meant to stay is how you create space for what was always meant to arrive. The Stoic man doesn't chase because he's too busy building something far more compelling, his own character. While others scramble to craft the perfect dating profile or rehearse clever lines, the Stoic focuses on the one thing no algorithm can replicate: virtue. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly in Meditations: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. That's the foundation. It's not about performing goodness to attract admiration. It's about embodying it so deeply that the right people recognize you without effort. Think of it like a beacon. A lighthouse doesn't chase ships, it simply shines, and those navigating by its light find their way. The Stoic approaches relationships the same way. He cultivates integrity not as a tactic, but as a way of life, knowing that authenticity isn't a magnet for everyone, but it's irresistible to the right ones. Consider two men at a social gathering. One name drops, exaggerates his accomplishments, and laughs a little too loudly at the host's jokes. The other listens more than he speaks, admits when he doesn't know something, and treats the waitstaff with the same respect as the guest of honor. Which one leaves a lasting impression? This isn't about perfection. The Stoics weren't saints, they were students of human nature. They understood that character is built in the small, unglamorous moments, the choices you make when no one's watching. Epictetus, who taught that philosophy isn't about words but action, said, "First tell yourself what kind of person you want to be, then do what you have to do." For the Stoic man, that means aligning his daily habits with his highest values. He doesn't chase validation because he's too focused on becoming someone he himself can respect. History offers a striking example. When the Roman senator Thrasea was sentenced to death by Nero for his Stoic principles, his final act wasn't a grand speech or plea for mercy. He spent the evening discussing philosophy with friends, then calmly opened his veins. As his blood drained, he turned to a companion and said, "Look well, young man. The gods are watching." That's character, not performative bravery, but quiet conviction that outlasts even death. Apply that to modern dating. A man who stands firm in his values, who doesn't compromise his integrity for fleeting attention, radiates a different kind of strength. Here's the paradox: the less you perform to attract others, the more you attract those who value substance. Ever met someone who's entirely comfortable in their own skin, flaws included? There's a magnetism to that kind of authenticity. The Stoic cultivates it by asking himself daily, am I becoming someone I'd admire, not am I becoming someone they'll like? That shift changes everything. When your focus is inward on wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, you stop contorting yourself to fit external expectations. This is why character trumps chase. Virtue isn't flashy, but it's durable. A charming facade might win first dates, but depth wins lifetimes. The Stoic knows that real connection isn't about mirroring someone's desires. It's about standing solid enough that the right person recognizes themselves in your light. As Seneca wrote, wherever there is a human being, there's an opportunity for kindness. That's the heart of it. When you stop chasing and start embodying, you don't just attract people. You attract the kind of relationships that fortify your soul. A Stoic man doesn't chase because he's made peace with a truth most spend their lives running from. Everything is fleeting. Seneca's On the Shortness of Life cuts to the bone on this. You act like mortals in all you fear and like immortals in all you desire. We cling to relationships as if they're eternal, then crumble when they end. But Stoicism reframes loss not as a catastrophe, but as the natural order of things. Imagine holding a handful of sand, squeeze too tightly and it spills through your fingers. Open your palm and it rests there, at least for a while. That's the Stoic's approach to connection. Cherish it without clutching. This isn't indifference, it's lucidity. Seneca watched Rome's elite hoard wealth, lovers, power, only to wail when fate reclaimed them. His remedy: rehearse death in your mind daily. Morbid only if you miss the point. By acknowledging the temporary nature of all things, including relationships, you strip loss of its power to devastate. Think of it like a traveler who packs light, knowing every inn is just a resting place, not a permanent home. The Stoic man loves deeply, but without the delusion that anything or anyone is his to keep. Consider modern dating's epidemic of attachment anxiety, the sleepless nights over a fading text thread, the frantic attempts to fix a bond that's unraveling. Contrast that with the Stoic who meets farewells with the same grace as greetings. When Seneca's own exile tore him from his life in Rome, he wrote not of vengeance or self-pity, but of opportunity. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. That's the alchemy of non-attachment. A relationship that ends isn't a failure, it's a completed chapter. The man who understands this doesn't chase fading connections, he honors them, then turns the page. History's Stoics lived this. When Cato the Younger lost his political cause to Caesar, he didn't grovel or plot revenge. He chose death on his own terms, declaring, "I am mistress of my fate," as he fell on his sword. Extreme, perhaps, but the principle remains. Clinging to what's already gone is a surrender of dignity. Apply that to modern heartbreak. The man who begs a departing lover to stay isn't proving his devotion. He's violating her autonomy and abandoning his own self-respect. The Stoic doesn't confuse love with ownership. Here's the unexpected freedom in this mindset. When you stop fearing loss, you start experiencing connection more fully. No more bracing for the end while it's still here. No more souring sweet moments with "what if they leave?" Seneca wrote, "He who fears loss will never truly possess anything." Think of two men in love. One drowns in worry, policing his partner's whereabouts, demanding constant reassurance. The other pours his energy into savoring each shared laugh, each quiet morning, not because he's naive, but because he knows impermanence makes these moments sacred. Which one experiences love more deeply? This is why Stoic men don't chase. Not because they're cold, but because they've learned to hold everything, even love, with open hands. Seneca's words ring across 2,000 years. You lose what you grasp most tightly. The man who fears loss chases ghosts. The Stoic builds altars to what was, then walks onward, knowing every ending is just the universe making room for a new beginning. The Stoic man doesn't chase because he's mastered the art of presence, the quiet discipline of anchoring himself in the here and now. While others spin into anxious fantasies about what might happen next, will she text back? Did I come on too strong? What if they lose interest? The Stoic grounds himself in what's actually unfolding. This isn't mystical detachment, it's the practiced skill of mindfulness, a core Stoic exercise called prosoph, vigilant attention to the present moment. Epictetus framed it as the antidote to suffering. Don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. Don't try to picture everything bad that could possibly happen. Stick with the situation at hand. In other words, chasing is just future tripping disguised as effort. Consider how obsession works. You meet someone interesting, and suddenly your mind races ahead, crafting scenarios, rehearsing conversations, clinging to outcomes that don't exist. The Stoic interrupts this spiral with a simple question: what's real right now? Not the story you're telling yourself about their silence, not the fantasy of how things could be, but the tangible facts in front of you. Marcus Aurelius called this stripping away the legend that encrusts things. When you're fully present, you see people as they are, not as vessels for your hopes or fears. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies show that mindfulness reduces rumination, the mental hamster wheel of what-ifs that fuels chasing behavior. The Stoic knew this intuitively. He doesn't bombard someone with texts because he's too busy noticing the warmth of his coffee, the rhythm of his breath, the work demanding his focus. Seneca described this as owning your time. Most people sacrifice today's peace for tomorrow's maybe, but the Stoic refuses that trade. Why chase a phantom future when the present offers so much to savor? Think of two men waiting for a reply. One refreshes his inbox every 30 seconds, his stomach tightening with each passing minute. The other notices his urge to check, then redirects his attention to the book in his lap or the sky outside his window. The difference isn't indifference, it's sovereignty over his own mind. The Stoic practices this redirection like a muscle. Every time he resists the pull of obsession, he strengthens his ability to engage authentically without desperation. This mindfulness extends to interactions themselves. Ever been on a date where the other person's eyes glaze over, clearly composing their next text in their head? The Stoic avoids that pitfall by listening with his full attention. He's not mentally rehearsing witty comebacks or calculating how to impress. He's truly there. That presence is palpable. People feel it when you're not halfway into the next moment, and it creates a connection no amount of chasing can manufacture. Here's the paradox: by anchoring himself in the present, the Stoic actually shapes a better future. Chasing scatters energy like seeds on barren soil, but mindfulness cultivates fertile ground. When you're fully engaged in each step, you don't miss the clues signaling genuine compatibility or its absence. You notice the subtle ways someone leans in when intrigued, the authenticity in their laughter, the alignment of values revealed in casual conversation. The anxious chaser overlooks these details because he's too busy projecting ahead. The Stoic sees clearly because he's right where he is. Marcus Aurelius left himself a note for moments of distraction. Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. Stop letting yourself be pulled in all directions. That's the heart of it. Mindfulness isn't passive. It's the active choice to invest your energy where it matters, not in chasing shadows, but in building something real, one present moment at a time. And when you do that, the right connections don't require force. They unfold naturally, like sunlight reaching through an open window. The Stoic man doesn't chase because he sees through the illusion of hierarchy, the idea that some people are inherently worth pursuing more than others. This isn't just about rejection, it's about recognizing that no human being, no matter how captivating, holds the keys to your worth. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled the known world, wrote in his private meditations, "What injures the hive injures the bee." That's Stoic cosmopolitanism in action, a radical belief that all people are threads in the same tapestry, deserving of equal respect. Chasing implies inequality, that one person is the prize and the other the beggar. The Stoic rejects that dynamic entirely. Think about how we're conditioned to view attraction. Society paints it as a ladder. Some people are catches, others are lucky to have them. But Stoicism flips that script. Epictetus, born enslaved, became a teacher who declared, "No man is free who is not master of himself." In other words, freedom isn't found in winning someone's favor. It's found in recognizing that no one's favor makes you whole. A man who chases is subtly admitting, "You're above me." The Stoic stands eye to eye, knowing that real connection can't exist where one person is pedestaled and the other is pleading. This philosophy shaped history's great Stoics. When Alexander the Great, a student of Aristotle, boasted about his conquests to Diogenes the Cynic, the philosopher didn't grovel or flatter. He simply said, "Stand aside, you're blocking my sun." That's the spirit of equality in action. Diogenes didn't see a king, he saw another mortal. Fast forward to modern dating. The man who scrambles for attention, who molds himself to fit someone's expectations, who treats a romantic prospect like a judge of his value, he's forgotten this truth. The Stoic remembers it daily. Here's what this looks like in practice. Picture two men interacting with someone they admire. One laughs too eagerly at jokes that aren't funny, agrees with opinions he doesn't share, and rushes to buy the next round, hoping generosity will earn affection. The other engages with relaxed confidence, unafraid to disagree or sit in silence, treating the encounter as a meeting of equals rather than an audition. Which one leaves a lasting impression? The Stoic doesn't perform because he knows performance is the language of inequality. He shows up as himself, not as a supplicant. Cosmopolitanism goes deeper than dating. It's the recognition that no race, gender, or social status confers inherent superiority. Seneca, who advised Nero, wrote letters to his friend Lucilius, a former slave, with the same respect he'd show a senator. This wasn't charity, it was principle. Apply that to modern relationships. A Stoic man doesn't chase the popular girl or the unattainable crush because he refuses to buy into the myth that some people are inherently more valuable. He knows that chemistry is real, but hierarchy is fiction. And here's the paradox: when you stop seeing others as prizes to win, you become someone they can't ignore. There's a magnetic quality to a man who engages without agenda, who appreciates without idolizing, who treats a CEO and a barrister with the same steady respect. It's not indifference, it's the quiet confidence of knowing that no external validation can elevate or diminish you. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In dating terms, the best way to honor yourself is to refuse to chase anyone who makes you feel like you're not already enough. This is why Stoic men walk away from lopsided dynamics. Not out of pride, but out of principle. They know that real connection isn't about proving your worth, it's about recognizing that worth was never in question to begin with. And in a world obsessed with chasing, that very refusal becomes the most powerful statement of all. Social pressure is like gravity. It pulls constantly, invisibly, shaping behavior without most people ever questioning its force. The Stoic man stands apart by recognizing this tug-of-war for what it is, an illusion of obligation, while modern dating culture screams, "Play the game." Text back strategically, wait 3 days to call, keep them guessing. The Stoic sees these rules as chains disguised as wisdom. Marcus Aurelius confronted this head-on in Meditations. "It never ceases to amaze me. We love ourselves above all others, yet care more about their opinions than our own." That's the heart of it. Chasing often stems not from genuine desire, but from the terror of being judged for not chasing. Consider how social pressure operates. A man feels compelled to buy expensive dinners not because he wants to, but because that's what's expected. He withholds affection to appear aloof because playing hard to get works. He stays in hollow relationships to avoid the stigma of being single. Every inauthentic choice whispers the same lie: your worth depends on their approval. The Stoic counters this with a radical question: who made these rules? Epictetus, who refused to bow even to emperors, dismissed societal scripts with a proverb: "If the world tells you to wear purple, let them, but you can still choose not to dye your soul." History's Stoics lived this defiance. When Roman society expected displays of wealth, Cotto the Younger wore the same patched cloak for decades. When peers mocked his frugality, he replied, "I'd rather blush in rags than pale in gold." That's the essence of rejecting social pressure, not as rebellion but as sovereignty. Modern dating mirrors this. The man who texts when he's genuinely curious, not when the 3-day rule permits, who ends relationships that no longer serve rather than clinging for appearances. He's not breaking rules. He's recognizing they never bound him to begin with. Here's where Stoic indifference shines. The ancient adiaphora doctrine, meaning indifferent things, draws a line between what matters virtue and what doesn't external opinions. Apply that to dating. Does waiting precisely 72 hours to call make you more honorable? Does pretending disinterest deepen connection? Stoicism reduces these anxieties to their absurd core. As Seneca joked, "Why do you comb your hair differently for each passerby? Style it once for yourself." The pressure to conform isn't harmless. It distorts genuine desire into performance. Picture 2 men at a club. One scans the room for status cues. What drinks are cool? Which jokes land with the group? Morphing himself to fit. The other engages naturally, unconcerned whether his vintage shirt or obscure book reference impresses. The difference isn't confidence, it's clarity. The Stoic knows no amount of external validation can substitute for the peace of being fully himself. This rejection of social noise extends beyond dating. The Stoic questions all inherited scripts, career paths, lifestyle choices, definitions of success. Marcus Aurelius, despite his imperial throne, wrote, "The only wealth you'll keep is what you've given away to yourself." In other words, pursuits rooted in others' expectations will always leave you bankrupt. Modern men chase promotions they don't want, buy cars they don't love, and court people they don't admire, all to satisfy judgments they've imagined. The Stoic alternative: live as if you've already been judged and found sufficient. When a man no longer contorts himself to fit dating trends or social norms, something unexpected happens. He becomes a beacon for those tired of playing roles. There's a quiet revolution in refusing to perform. It whispers you could be free too, and in that space, unburdened by shoulds and supposed toss, real connection finally has room to breathe. The Stoic man doesn't chase because he measures success in a currency most never consider: virtue, not victories. While society applauds the man who collects phone numbers, notches conquests, or wins in love as if it were a competition, the Stoic quietly rewrites the rules. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on freedom, laid it bare: wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. That's the radical shift. For the Stoic, true success isn't about accumulating attention or affection. It's about refining character until external validation feels irrelevant. Think about how modern dating glorifies superficial wins, the match count, the streak of first dates, the bragging rights of fleeting encounters. Now contrast that with the Stoic's ledger. His metrics are internal. Did I act with integrity? Did I respect their autonomy? Did I remain true to my principles when tempted to compromise? These aren't just lofty ideals, they're practical filters. A man who defines success as virtue doesn't chase hollow connections because he's too busy building something that lasts, his own moral fiber. Epictetus, who taught in a cramped Athenian classroom while Rome's elite chased power and pleasure, framed wealth as self-sufficiency. Freedom isn't secured by filling your pockets, he said, but by emptying your cravings. Apply that to relationships. The man who needs constant validation is impoverished, no matter how many admirers crowd his inbox. The Stoic, though, measures riches differently. His abundance comes from needing nothing beyond his own ethical compass. Picture two men at a reunion. One brags about his romantic conquests. The other listens with quiet amusement, secure in knowing his worth isn't tied to someone else's fleeting interest. Which one radiates true wealth? This redefinition of success extends beyond dating. The Stoic assesses his entire life through this lens. Career advancements, social status, material comforts, these are preferred indifference, meaning they're nice if they align with virtue, but worthless if they require moral compromise. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, journaled daily about guarding his character above all else. Waste no time debating what a good man should be. Be one, that's the litmus test. When your North Star is virtue, chasing external validation becomes not just unnecessary but beneath you. History offers a vivid example. When King Antigonus offered Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lavish gifts to join his court, the philosopher declined. His students gasped. Think of the influence. The riches, Zeno replied. He who needs a king's favor to feel important is already poor. Modern dating mirrors this dynamic. The man who chases approval, who molds himself to fit trends, who treats love as a scoreboard, is trading his sovereignty for scraps. The Stoic refuses that bargain. His wealth is the unshakable knowledge that no amount of attention can elevate or diminish his inherent worth. Here's the paradox: when you stop chasing society's version of success, you start living by a standard that outlasts it. Epictetus asked his students, if you could inherit the wealth of the richest man but adopt his cravings too, would you truly be richer? The answer reshapes priorities. A Stoic man might enjoy romance, companionship, even passion, but he won't confuse them with success. That distinction allows him to walk away from what's shallow and invest in what's substantial. Because in the end, the only conquest that matters is the one no one else sees, the daily choice to live by principle, not applause. Stoicism doesn't just teach men not to chase, it reframes the entire game. What if the secret to attracting what you truly desire isn't pursuit but presence? Over these 20 reasons, we've uncovered the radical truth. Chasing is the illusion of control, while stillness is the ultimate power. Let's tie it all together with a twist you won't forget. First, the foundation. A Stoic man doesn't chase because his worth isn't borrowed, it's built. From self-sufficiency to the dichotomy of control, he invests in what's his to govern: his actions, his integrity, his resilience, emotional dependency. A foreign concept, toxic dynamics beneath him. He measures success in virtue, not validations, and trusts that what's meant for him won't bypass him. Social pressures crumble against his indifference to scripts he never signed. And through it all, he redefines strength, not as force, but as the quiet confidence of a man who knows the difference between effort and futility. But here's the twist most miss. Stoicism doesn't eliminate desire, it purifies it. The chase isn't removed, it's upgraded. Instead of chasing people, you choose principles. Instead of chasing attention, you cultivate character. The archer still draws his bow, but his focus isn't on the target's applause, it's on the integrity of his release. This is the alchemy of Stoicism. It turns frantic pursuit into intentional living. So where does that leave you? Look back at these 20 reasons from boundary respect to amor fati and ask yourself, which one struck a chord? Was it the clarity of non-attachment or the power of patience? The dignity of walking away or the magnetism of emotional independence? Drop a comment below and share which insight landed hardest. And if you're ready to go deeper into this mindset, hit subscribe. The Stoics didn't just philosophize about life, they mastered it. Now it's your turn. The chase ends here, the choice begins.